Welcome to another episode of Bro History. It's Henry Zamota, Danny Abdel-Jabbar, and we are recording on a Tuesday, right?
Yep. Club's going up on a Tuesday.
Going up on a Tuesday. Just to give you an idea of what our recording schedule is like, it's either on Tuesday or Wednesday. Usually, right? Tuesday or Wednesday?
It's hopefully Tuesday so that we don't have to scramble to edit the podcast to get it out Thursday morning.
Yeah. So if we don't record it on Tuesday, that means that we're doing it on Wednesday night, and we're basically just like, fuck it. Let's just throw the raw audio file up on iTunes.
No. We do a little bit of editing and a little bit of compression and shit like that.
We do a little bit of TLC to the show after it, but you know what? So here's a side note before we get into the main topic. Did you listen to the New York Times Caliphate podcast?
No, I didn't, actually. It sounds very interesting.
Sounds interesting. So I downloaded the entire thing on a road trip, and I was going to go in there with an open mind and say, all right, let's just see what they have to say. I couldn't get past the first episode, not because they said anything that triggered me or anything like that, or I disagreed with the narrative. It was because I don't like that style of podcast where it's overly edited. Do you know what I mean?
Well, I mean, I actually do, because I listen to The Daily every day, and that's a super edited podcast. But I don't know. I'm an audio engineer, so I find that shit cool when you're able to on a really well produced show. Not to say I don't like our style either. This is fun too, but both have their merits. So you couldn't listen to it because it was just overly produced?
I couldn't listen to it because there was just too much. I don't like The Daily either because it's too much just shit in between interviews. Someone will be interviewing a guy and then the interviewer will be repeating everything she says. He worked at a steel mill his entire life, and I worked in a steel mill my entire life. It's all right, we heard him say it. Why can't you just have an interview?
Yeah.
It's I lived in Michigan my entire life. All of my 5 brothers worked in the same manufacturing plant that I worked in. She's all of his brothers worked, and come on. But yeah, I just can't get it. It's just not my cup of tea. Obviously, those are the biggest podcasts in the world, so who am I to judge it?
Right,
we're just some third-rate show, so we're literally recording this thing out of a cave in Afghanistan. So it's not we can't even talk shit. But I will talk shit about the New York Times Caliphate podcast because I wasn't able to get through it. What I wanted to do is I wanted to listen to it, and I wanted to kind of poke it and be like, oh no, that was dumb. Tear through the New York Times narrative like we all love doing.
And you couldn't do it.
I couldn't do it. Couldn't get past the style. Of course.
Maybe I'll do it because I can totally tolerate that style. I quite like it, actually. And, just hanging out with you for all of these, hours of podcasts that we've done, I think I'll be able to represent the show, and I'll be able to maybe
They're privateers! They're nothing but privateers! You're going to jump onto that? You're going to you're going to think like me, they're nothing but fucking mercenary privateers. I would recommend it. So I guess today we're talking, like always, we always have a lot of stuff that's planned for these shows, and half the stuff that we plan never ends up getting into the episode, mainly because we cover both history and current events at the same time, and we try to do both to the best of our ability, and just so we have more to talk about and we can relate history back into current affairs.
Right.
And something really interesting happened the other day, and it's definitely a follow-up to an episode we did the other day, or about 2 weeks ago, when either Iran allegedly shot a cruise missile into a Saudi oil field, or the Houthis hit that Saudi oil field with a drone.
Right. And
it was really interesting because honestly, when we were talking, I don't know if we jumped to a narrative. I know I'm not. feel it's inconclusive, like what happened.
Agreed.
There at this point, like I can't make I can't tell you what my honest opinion is if it was Iran, if it were the Houthis. However, after what happened on Tuesday? This happened on Saturday night, right?
Yep. Mm-hmm. Very recently. Yeah.
Was it Saturday or Sunday this happened?
I don't know. It depends because they're ahead of our time, so I'm not sure if it was Saturday.
Losing track of time.
Yeah.
It makes me think that the Houthis are capable of quite a lot, because those guys are resourceful as hell.
So what happened, Henry? What went down?
So the Houthis, they captured. So you could not believe these numbers. They may not be accurate. The Houthis are saying that they captured about 2,000 Saudi troops and killed another 500.
Mm-hmm. That's 3 brigades, by the way. It's massive.
So 3, and what's really interesting is this wasn't in Yemen. They crossed over the border of Saudi Arabia.
That's right.
And it was a pincer move where they were kind of closed in from both sides, and it was pretty shocking. I didn't imagine that the Houthis would do that. But I guess they are quite capable of doing it, as they have showed. So, what's your take on this? You're more of the military guy than I am.
First of all, like the thing that I want to point out is like this should be your evidence whenever you see on mainstream media or some other podcast or just one of your friends talking about how the Houthis are just this ragtag bunch of like weirdos that they couldn't possibly do anything precise and they're just like terrorists or something like that. They very well may be terrorist or terrorist affiliations, but one thing that you cannot deny, especially after seeing this, is that they are very capable, like very fucking capable. And the reason for this is because they released this video, and I saw it on YouTube. Actually, Henry, you sent that to me, and it's like maybe, I don't know, 12 or 15 minutes long of just straight up video documentation of all the people they captured, of all of the weapons they captured, of all the tanks and like armored vehicles that they captured, and just generally like walking all of these defeated, captured soldiers down a line, and there's like a 1/4 miles long line of people walking across the fucking desert, right, to God knows where, and it's abundantly clear that those are definitely the Houthis, and that the people that they've captured are either Saudis or people fighting for Saudi Arabia. In any case, you can see on the sides of the trucks and shit that they captured the Saudi emblems. You can see the types of weapons that they captured, of which there were thousands of weapons. It is honestly one of the craziest battles, and I'm so upset that they don't have more video of what actually went down, because I think it would be absolutely insane to see what went down.
Yeah, the thing I immediately thought of was Hannibal crossing the Alps to attack Italy.
Hell yeah. They monsters, man.
Something that I immediately noticed, though, is that a lot of the soldiers were African.
See, I don't know about that, and
they looked a lot of guys looked African. No, I'm not saying that.
Yeah.
No, I'm not. I'm just an observation. There was a lot of black guys. The Saudis use a lot of African soldiers from Sudan and Chad and different parts of Africa because they're cheap.
I mean, that part to me was a little inconclusive. What also was inconclusive for me was the location. Right, so the Houthis do claim that they crossed into the border, and I think the thing that they're pointing out now, and a lot of the things that I've been reading, is that the Houthis have been fighting this war of attrition for many years, and it seems like it's swinging towards, in their direction. They're picking up some wins. If we're counting this as their win, and we're counting the oil field as their win, and we're counting the several other instances of them bombing oil tankers in the straits and things like that, then it's obviously moving in the right direction. And what I think they're trying to do is reestablish what the Yemeni border, or at least what the Houthi-controlled Yemeni border is. And I think that they're starting to get a lot more public support from the Yemenis in general. because, this coalition-based, Saudi and Emiratis that have been fighting against them haven't been able to remove the Houthis, haven't been able to install their government for many, many years, have basically caused the worst famine, in the region, have caused, worst cholera epidemic. The embargo, the blockade there is just making it worse. And I think they're starting to see the Houthis as like, hey, they're actually picking up some wins here, right? And they're actually doing something. So what we're noticing is a lot more support, within Yemen for them. And one thing that I read was that it's possible that they're trying to reclaim certain provinces that are right there on the border that might have been in dispute in terms of territory. And they're pushing farther and farther into Saudi territory because they want to, kind of set up like a buffer zone, almost like a DMZ, if you will, for the future. I think it's super interesting how it's panning out. And I think it's even more interesting after the conversation that we had over the weekend with one of our listeners, who was actually in Yemen early on. I think it was something like 2011. We read one of his questions, on the previous episode in our Q&A, and we actually got a chance to talk to this guy. And the way that he described the situation on the ground was that there were a number of tribes and groups. I think there was 12 or something like that, that were vying for power at the time, and the Houthis were just one of the few of them, not relatively known, and that they were super disorganized at the time. And, he was talking about a leaf called Qat. It's like QAT. And evidently this is like their drug of choice out there. And they would sit down and do nothing for a whole long time and chew their Qat and chill. And as soon as they ran out of this Qat, this drug that they were doing all day, they were like, all right, well, I guess let's go do some fighting. And they'd load up their magazines and head out to battle in random dispersion. And for them to be able to go from that description to the current description where they're capturing 2,000 Saudi armed, let's call them Saudi armed militants, right?
Remember the miscommunication we had the other day?
Which one?
When I texted you what happened, I said, I'm a dumb texter. I said U.S. armed forces were captured in Yemen, but I didn't mean it like that. Yeah. I meant that forces that were armed with U.S. weapons were captured by the Houthis. And you were like, what the hell? What's going on?
I was like, I didn't see any U.S. forces there. What are you talking about?
Dumbass.
No. So that's really important, too. I'm glad you pointed that out, because the weapons, the Houthis didn't just capture some random band of, rebels, using old ass AK-47s and shit. No, they were using modern American technology. You can see the stark difference between what tech that they had and what tech that they acquired, because they had a line of old Toyota Land Cruisers and Toyota Hiluxes, and they were just stockpiling the backs of their trucks full of all these brand new weapons, and they were driving they're the captured armored vehicles. I don't actually know the exact model numbers of them. I'll look into it later. But they're clearly American-made weapons that were purchased by Saudi Arabia, that are now firmly in the hands of the Houthis, because they ran train on these three brigades.
What an interesting take that I'm hearing is that there is support from the inside. Because 20% of Saudi Arabia is Shiite, and Shiites in Saudi Arabia they're not only a minority, but they're oppressed. They're treated like shit.
Yeah,
they're they're second class citizens.
And I think you'll probably start hearing this more in the mainstream media as this comes to light, because you know how they love to make this a sectarian, religious thing. So they'll definitely be harping on that as soon as they get off the idea that the Houthis are just incapable and it was totally Saudi Arabia. They'll move on to being like, hey, this is a sectarian war. This is a religious Sunni versus Shia thing. So I definitely think you'll hear that more as this progresses. But definitely, an interesting angle, because that could be, how or why the Houthis were able to actually bomb that oil field, right, with those drones. It's potentially why and how the answer to the issue of the angle of attack, or the issue of range, or the myriad number of issues that people take with that strike, and why it couldn't have been the Houthis and it had to have been Iran. That could be a factor that we're not paying enough attention to, that could have contributed.
Yeah, and you're right. I mean, that angle's already being played up. I mean, that angle's played up with every single Middle Eastern war, that it's just strictly a Sunni and a Shiite thing. And there's some truth to that. You have to admit it. Like, there definitely is sectarian divide, and
for sure,
people are very tribal. So there is truth to that. However, where it kind of leaves reality is when they blame like every single conflict between Arabs ever, between Sunnis and Shiites. They'll be like, this has been a 1,000-year war between these two tribes, these two religious sects. They'll never be able to get along. They're going to fight forever. That's not really the case. Like an example in Iraq, which is way different. Like Baghdad was way wealthier than Yemen at any time, but this kind of is thrown over the entire Middle East anyway. And Iraq is having its own big sectarian divides. But in Baghdad, I think it was about half the marriages were they were mixed faith marriages between Sunnis and Shiites.
I didn't know that. That's interesting.
Yeah, it's interesting when you see stats like that. And in the case of Yemen, so what's really important to point out is that the Houthis are not the same branch of Shiite as the Iranians, the Twelvers. The Houthis they're a political separatist movement that wants to free itself from the government that they feel is a tyranny, that they feel is a dictatorship that's basically propped up by the West. And this myth about it being a religious movement because they're Shiites is just kind of a false and fallacy when you really think about it and measure it up against other conflicts in the Middle East.
Right. And if it has anything to do with it, it's like the 10th thing on the list of 10 things, 10 reasons why.
Yeah, and like the Zaydi Shiite, they're very different from they're different from the Twelver Shiite, like in Iran. And I'm no expert on like Islamic doctrine or Islam in general or the different sects of Islam at all, but I know a little bit about it. And the Shiite, the Zaydi Shiite, I'll roll this back. So the Zaydi Shiite, they take their name from Zayd ibn Ali, who led a revolt against the Umayyad Caliphate in the 7th century, and he died in it. And they kind of look at him as they see him as the fourth Imam. Like the difference between the Zaydis is that the Zaydis have 5 Imams, and the Shiite, the 12er Shiites, they have 12 Imams. To get it, 12ers, 12er Imams.
Right.
So the Zaydis don't recognize the Imams that they feel to not stand up against corruptness. So they kind of have like this anarchist type philosophy behind them that derives that's not the same. It's like the Khomeini, Khomeiniism, they embrace like authority. Like the Twelvers believe in like a subjection to authority. The Zaydis are much more like the libertarians of the Muslim world or something like that. I don't know if that's the best way to phrase it or not, but it's kind of an interesting way to look at it. Like that they are very different, and I think that their theology definitely plays a part in their political activism and how they want to resist. Essentially things like global capitalism, and I don't want to sound too much like a fringe nut, but they want to resist things like globalism or neoliberalism. I should say that.
No, Alex Jones should be all over that shit.
Neoliberalism for the right winger, and global capitalism for the left winger. I'll appease you both. Say what it is. Say what you want. And it's like really funny because both political tribes in the United States, they both are talking about the same thing when they talk about when they talk about global capitalism and neoliberalism. Like they're talking about the exact same thing.
Yeah, they just have different names for it.
There's different names for it, but they both hate it and they know it's bad. But let's just put it this way: they resist the West, and I think that stems from their theology. So it's interesting. It's an interesting group to look at. It's the Yemenis. We had a great conversation, and we learned a lot more about the Yemenis and the groups like Houthi. They're a very interesting bunch, I guess I'll say, to say the least.
Yeah, definitely. And with that explanation, Henry, I think you put yourself in like the 1% of people that understand what Zaydi Shi'ism is versus 12-verse Shi'ism. So I don't think you're giving yourself enough credit there.
Well, I mean, there is a lot more to it. It's an interesting topic when you look at like Islam as a whole. I mean, I went to Catholic school, and one of the cool things about going to Catholic school, and you don't realize this when you're going to school, you take theology classes,
right?
And you start with the monotheistic religions. You start with Judaism, you go to Christianity, and then you actually learn about Islam as well. You don't learn about that much in Islam, but you do learn about just the different religions in the world. And, obviously it's when you go to Catholic school, it's a bit of a pro-Christ bent, to say the least. However, I had, in my school, I went to Holy Cross High School, an all-boys Catholic school in Flushing, Queens. Anyone who is from Queens, holla.
Holla.
I just cringed a bit. My teachers were actually pretty liberal. Like when I was in high school when The Passion of the Christ came out. Let's just put it that way. And they were denouncing it. They were like, the Passion of the Christ is terrible. It's a horrible idea to make a movie like that. It's not even true. That's what they were saying. They were Christian brothers who were saying that. And I was like, what?
They were saying it wasn't true, that Jesus Christ died for your sins? What is wrong with them?
They were saying that like the Passion plays were just used for anti-Semitic purposes, which there's a lot of truth to that. However, I digress. It is super interesting to look at the difference between the Sunnis and the Shiites on a theological base. There's a lot of there's a lot of differences, but they're very minor when you look at it. Like when you're not Muslim, they'd be minor to us. It'd be like the same way that someone who's not a Christian will look at the differences between a Catholic and a Protestant, for instance.
Yeah, I can see that. Yeah,
like if you look at a Christian, if you're not a Christian and you look at the Christian population, and one person's like, I'm Catholic, and the other person says, I'm not Catholic, I'm a Methodist, you're like, okay, what's the difference? You both believe in Jesus Christ, right? Like, yeah. So isn't that the religion? Like, isn't that the religion?
Yeah.
The difference between the two is that it is power. Really, it's do you believe in a direct relationship with God, or do you believe in a bishop and a priest and a pope and a hierarchy to God? Protestants versus Catholics, and
right.
It's the same type of thing for Sunnis and Shiites. It's a disagreement over the lineage of Muhammad. That's really what it is. It's just who is the next imam after Muhammad. That's where the big separation starts. But the way they worship isn't really different. I think they have some different interpretations of the hadith, but that's pretty much the main theological difference in their perceptions. But these conflicts, they start out as sectarian, but when you go forward, when you actually look at why there's conflict, it's not because of their beliefs. It's because of who has power. It's because of religious nepotism. Right. And it's the same thing that happened in Europe.
Right.
So the 30-year war may have happened because of religious differences.
But there were much more reasons beyond that too. It was the power structure of the Roman Catholic Church that was absolutely dominating most of Europe and bleeding them dry of all of their funds. That was a big reason. You start cutting into people's pockets. And yeah, sure, you can say like, hey, I believe in a direct relationship with God versus I believe in a power structure and like a pope and things like that. That certainly is the starting point, but there are so many other widespread implications that led to this fracture there, and there's a lot of politics in it, and there's a lot of, like you said, religious nepotism. It goes much, much deeper than that.
It goes much deeper than that. And Islam right now is kind of like how Christianity was like 400 years ago. It's because, all right, so you have different sects of religion who are very tribe oriented. So when one group gets control of the government, that's what really ends up being the problem. So let's just say if a majority Sunni country or a minority Sunni country has a Sunni leader and they only dish out favors and government jobs to other Sunnis, then the Shiites are going to be pissed. And what that ultimately does, it forces the other group to band together to resist resist from being oppressed from the other group. So it's who gets the money. It's never like because of the theological difference that these groups fight. It's because of money and power and identity politics at the end of the day.
And so to kind of wrap all this up, one thing you should take away from today's show is that, one, it's a lot more complicated, this war in Yemen, than just Sunni and Shiism. And the Houthis are not to be, slept on. They are very capable, and they have documented evidence of them making giant gains in this conflict. And, I think those are the two big things to take away.
Two big takeaways. So what we were planning on speaking about, I think we said we were going to talk about it, and it definitely, there's a good segue into this.
Right.
Is
while we're on Saudi Arabia,
good old while we're on Saudi Arabia. So tomorrow is the anniversary of Jamal Khashoggi's death, right? Mm-hmm. Is it? So it's this week. Forget the exact day.
Actually, I think it might be the 4th, so that might be Friday.
3rd or 4th. Yeah. I forget the exact date, but it's this week for sure. Now, this is really interesting because Mohammed bin Salman is looking really bad right now. Yeah. Bin Salman is looking really, really, really bad. And this guy has effectively, it looks like they've lost this war. And the Saudi public, I cannot see them being this happy. I don't know how this news is going to be disseminated into Saudi Arabia. Obviously, the elites know what's going on.
Right.
I don't know if the average Saudi is getting the full story. They probably are. I mean, they're all on Twitter. They know what's going on. MBS is looking pretty bad right now. Right now at this period of time, he is at an all-time low.
He's pulling really low.
He's at an all-time low as his time as the crown prince, because this war, he was the defense minister when this war started back in 2015, when he was yet to be crowned crown prince. He yet to be named the next king of Saudi Arabia. He was the one who really kind of engaged in this war, and I think a lot of it had to do with what one of the main princes, one of their big princes, I think it was Prince Sultan, or I might be getting the name wrong, but their Yemen prince, the guy who kind of like knew, who dealt with Yemen foreign policy, meaning the guy who paid off the right people within Yemen to keep them from revolting, died. So I think everything is kind of went crazy from there, and when Mohammed bin Salman consolidated power, he really left that committee system that was, I guess, effective and keeping the Saudi Arabian monarchy alive for so many years, when so many people were writing its obituary. Like, how many times have people have written out Saudi Arabia? Like, oh, Saudi Arabia is done. Like, every single decade, there's been a crisis in Saudi Arabia, going back to the 50s and 60s with the rise of Nasser. Going all the way to 9/11 when people were like, what the fuck? The people who hijacked the plane were Saudi Arabian, or at least the vast majority of them. So there's been many times that there's been the obituary that was written for Saudi Arabia, but they've always kind of pulled through. And I think the Saudi kings and the Saudi Saudis, the Saudi council, kind of are aware of Saudi Arabia's weaknesses. Like, They knew that Saddam Hussein would destroy them. They knew that, they were aware that a form of political Islam could emerge, just like in Iran. They were aware that, that Nasser would clean their clock in a fight, even though Nasser ended up getting his clock clean in Yemen. I think they were very aware of their vulnerability within the Middle East, and MBS, I don't think he grew up in those times. He didn't experience those times when that type of carefulness was within that government, and I think he just went amok and crazy. And one of the big decisions that really shows that is his decision. I'm going to go off and say decision because I'm pretty convinced that that MBS probably hired the guys to kill Jamal Khashoggi.
Yeah, probably.
See, he's admitting responsibility for it, though. Did you hear that?
Yeah, I did. Super interesting. After a full year of this shit now.
A full year of it on the anniversary. I admit responsibility just because I am going to be king, and I have to take responsibility because this is my world. Like, that's basically his logic. Like, it happened under my house, so it's fine.
Yeah. It's like a soft admission. It's like, I'm in a position of power, so I'm gonna take the fall for this one, but not explicitly saying like, yeah, I totally did that. Like I called the hit squad on them.
At the very least, though, he is taking moral responsibility of it, even though if he's not taking criminal responsibility for the murder of Khashoggi.
I guess that's a step in the right direction.
But look at it, Saudi Arabia. I'm going to say this as nice as possible. It's a nasty monarchy that routinely murders people in Yemen with drone strikes. They've been caught red-handed aiding and abetting Al Qaeda in Syria and around the rest of the world. They are involved in incredibly horrible things, especially the intentional starvation from their blockade within Yemen. So there's a lot of blood on their hands. So it's interesting that one journalist kind of puts them on the map, of being bad guys, right? Like. It's horrifying that what they did to him.
It's the American, factor. Like he wasn't a citizen, but he was a resident of the United States, and his kids are citizens. So like, and he works for an American company. So that's really what did it, I think.
What's really interesting about the whole Jamal Khashoggi affair is that the Saudis kept on changing their stories every single day. So
yeah.
it was so ridiculous because, everyone's probably well aware that a hit squad of 15 guys went in to get him.
Yep.
It was 15 guys. It wasn't like one assassinator they got him cyanide.
If you've ever seen a picture of Jamal Khashoggi when he was alive, like he is not a threatening looking guy. Like you don't need 15 dudes to take this guy out, like at all.
Well, here's what happened. So they kept on changing their story. They first said that no, we didn't do it. We didn't do it. Like there's no evidence of him leaving the consulate. So you had to have done it. Like he went in, he never walked out, and they're like, no, we don't know what happened. And then there came out that there was audio tapes of him
from his like Apple Watch, right?
Yeah, there was an audio tape of him, and then they went with like, okay, it was a botched interrogation. We just wanted to capture him and interrogate him, but we would never kill him. Mm-hmm. But then they ended up bringing a bone saw. So like, what? Why did you take his pants off? Why did Sharon?
Didn't they take his pants off? Didn't they take his clothes and try to get like a fake impersonator to walk out so they can get evidence of him leaving or some shit?
If they did do that, I missed that, but it sounds like something. It's so botched. It sounds so silly. But yeah, they're trying to add some plausible deniability, but like they brought a bone saw. Like what the hell? Come on, guys.
Seriously.
And it's you know what? I actually kind of believed it at first when that story first came out, when they first when they were first saying they were trying to capture him, I thought they were. I thought that, like, oh, maybe he knows. Maybe the Washington Post journalist knows something. They're trying to figure out what he knows.
Uh-oh.
They're after me. Menji, they're after me.
You know too much, Henry.
I know too much.
Mohammed bin Salman's after you now.
MBS. Now they're captured. They can't get me. So they sent 15 guys. 11 of them have been arrested. I think 5 of them face a death penalty right now.
That's crazy.
In Saudi Arabia, you can get the death penalty for sneezing, like,
yeah.
So, I hope that dismembering a body in Saudi Arabia with a bar that they set for capital punishment would be included in that, no matter how far up they are.
How low that bar is.
How low that bar is. Those guys were trained, and we did it. We mentioned this in doing another podcast.
That was an interesting one. Ooh, that was a good one. They really don't want you to tell us. Yeah, so we mentioned this.
This is how the globalists keep you down.
No, we mentioned this in a previous podcast, and yeah, they actually came here to the United States to be trained. What state was that in?
I think it was in Arkansas.
Yeah, Arkansas or some shit. Tennessee, maybe. Yeah, tier 1 group. Right?
Tier 1 group. Yeah. It had that super cool promo video.
Yeah, it was like all heavy metal and shit and like stuff blowing up. I'm
gonna play that because it was so. I'm gonna throw this in the podcast because it was so. It was so good.
Yeah.
It was so funny. I would recommend watching it because it does make you want to fucking punch somebody in the face.
Yeah, but they came here for their special, bone saw training or whatever, and yeah, and then we cut them loose, and they went off and did their thing. Well,
terrible advertising for Tier 1 group because
seriously,
they did a terrible job.
Wait, if I remember correctly, did they change their name?
Maybe. I think they might have been called something like if I'm remembering the story right, they were called like Dynamic Counter Group or something like that.
Yeah.
If you go to their website,
you'll have to listen to that podcast again.
I mean, you can just type in. You don't have to go. I mean, listen to it. It's a good podcast.
Yeah.
However, you can just type in Tier 1 group, and you'll probably find like all of their information. So you don't have to go through the archives and guess which one, because I don't even remember what episode we talked about.
I'm pretty sure it's on YouTube, and we review their website together.
Oh yeah, I remember
cool.
that.
Yeah,
I forgot we did that.
Yeah, it was hilarious.
And we ended it with we ended it with like a joke where we were going through positive news stories and trying to find the negative things about them.
Yeah, that's right.
we went to like a pause, like we were like, we're talking about so many negative things in the world.
goodnews.net or some shit like that.
Yeah, goodnews.net, and we were scrolling down the stories, and it'll be like, a kid hears for the first time ever, and we were gonna be like, yeah, but after going through years of like no audio and like being isolated. So we were just like spinning really good stories in very dark ways. I don't know. It was interesting.
It was fun.
It was fun. All right. Back to the Khashoggi. So yeah, it's interesting. Saudi Arabia, they've been going. The funny thing about MBS is that when he was first named Crown Prince, people were looking at him like he was a reformer, just because he was taking that society and making them do just like somewhat normal things, like allowing women to drive. Like, oh, he's a reformer. Like, finally.
It's like, yeah,
women can drive. The reason why women were allowed to drive in Saudi Arabia, I don't think it's necessarily to do with MBS. It's because people were complaining about driving their wives to
everywhere.
Here's what I think would happen. So when oil prices went down a couple of years ago, like whenever oil, the thing that's really important to understand about Saudi Arabia is that their standard of living is directly affected by the price of oil.
Right.
So if the price of oil is high, then the standard of living goes up for the average Saudi citizen, because Saudis, their living is almost completely subsidized by oil revenue from the government.
It's like Alaska here. In Alaska they get like $1,000 a month, like no questions asked, just because of oil. Because of the oil industry. So think about that, like Alaska in Saudi Arabia, but like times like 1,000.
Yeah, times 1,000, and with that there comes this mutual understanding between the population of Saudi Arabia and the monarchy. So the monarchy will take care of their material needs, so they'll provide them things like healthcare, education.
I think they help out with housing as well.
Housing, they subsidize like almost like so many things a part of their lifestyle.
Like Bernie Sanders would like, totally cream his pants over this shit.
Yeah, but he wouldn't want to take the oil though.
No,
like,
that's true. That's true.
So here, yeah,
I really like this idea.
I like the Saudis.
You
they do everything correctly.
You got to figure out a way to get it off of the oil.
I was reading this thing about Saudi healthcare. There was this guy who had a brain aneurysm, and he was in his 60s or 70s, and they put this guy in Prague, where they have really good, I guess, brain rehab.
Brain surgeons.
I think they put him in like a brain rehab.
Brain camp.
Brain camp. And I am imagining that type of care is incredibly expensive, and they subsidize everything.
Yep.
So they like provide all this material and all these things that create a good living standard for their population. Also water, I'm pretty sure, is subsidized, which is super expensive in the Middle East.
Yeah.
And with that,
You have to put
Saudis,
up with some shit.
the Saudis will obey. Like, it means obedience. You know what I mean? It's like, I'll pay for all your shit, but you better listen to me. Now, if their living standard goes down, if there's a huge drop in the price of oil, the last time I looked at the price of oil, it was like $55, $56 or something like that.
$58 per barrel. That's when we did the episode on the oil.
58 a barrel. I haven't looked at it since then, but it's
but that was post rebound. Like that value of oil had shot so far down when news of that attack happened. So like after the rebound, it was at $58, but it was much lower than that when it happened. Which means, to your point, bad things for the standard of living of Saudi Arabians. Yeah,
and when that happened, I think one of the reasons why MBS he was able to launch into stardom is because when he became crown prince, I believe the price of oil was around $30 or so. It was low. And whenever that happens, it's like, the Saudis are like, what the fuck?
Yeah.
What are we going to do?
Yeah.
Hopefully this oil starts going. Stop producing oil. Stop producing. We need to keep the prices down.
Yeah.
Keep the price down. Stop producing. Because Saudi Arabia is the swing state, they're the country that basically produces and stops producing in order to control the price of oil. It's why they have so much power, because they're the swing oil producer of the world.
Those practices are akin to Chinese currency manipulation. At the moment that they decide hey, we're not doing very well, they'll just ratchet down some of the oil production, and there you go. Here's some capital, right? That brings the prices high. So while it's not currency, it's certainly like liquid gold, like black liquid gold. For them.
Black gold. The Beverly Hillbillies of the Middle East.
Seriously.
They struck oil. So when that happened, when the oil prices went down, MBS tried to roll out this plan called Saudi Vision 2020 or 2030 rather.
Yeah, it's 2030 yet.
2030.
2020 would be like, in a few months.
Yeah, 2020 wouldn't be, I guess, possible. And their plan was to find alternative energy, because eventually they're going to have to wean off their oil revenue. Right. It's not going to last forever. Mm-hmm. So they were recognizing that, and they were trying to transform the Saudi economy. And one of the main things they were trying to do was I think they were trying to make Jeddah was a more of a tourist attraction. So people would stop visiting. Westerners are not going to go to Mecca, obviously. Right. They're not allowed in Mecca if you're not a Muslim. However, they were trying to attract international finance. They were trying to attract money. But people don't. MBS really put himself in a shitty place. He ended up going up Schitt's Creek without a paddle, because he purged the government. essentially. Like he
Right.
he purged
Locked
the
them all up
government
in the Ritz-Carlton.
He locked them all up in the Ritz-Carlton in a in a 4-star hotel. Didn't even put them in a 5-star. Apparently these guys were all, not all of them, but apparently some of them were tortured. So
Yeah.
so he purged the government. You may want to think that he did it to consolidate power, but I interviewed Gregory Goss almost a year ago at this point. He said that it wasn't really, and he's a real expert on this. He's the
guy.
He's the dean of the Bush International, not George W. George H. Bush, the first Bush. He's a dean of Texas A&M International Relations, and he was saying that it wasn't really a shakedown. It wasn't he wasn't trying to consolidate power. He had already done that. This was just purely a shakedown because a lot of these princes, he felt weren't investing enough money into his economic visions or his economic plan. So he was basically just shaking them down.
Right, grabbing them by the ankles and shaking them till all the coins rattle out. Yeah.
So, but when he did that, people are like, okay, so this new Saudi, the guy who's going to be the Saudi king in the future, he's going to fucking just start purging people from the government. He's unpredictable, and he totally is unpredictable. Like with the decisions that he's made, of course, the war in Yemen, the murder of Jamal Khashoggi, which has just turned out to be the incredible. I mean, obviously it's evil. We're making jokes, and we probably shouldn't do it because he was murdered at the end of the day in a very brutal manner.
Right.
However, there's so many things that were brought to the attention, because I don't even think the war in Yemen would have become something that people even covered if it wasn't for some of the other scandals that MBS was in. So this guy has really put himself in a bad place. He definitely reversed public opinion of himself as a reformer, and I don't know where it's going, because he seems to be really losing. I mean, I don't know what's going on internally within like the Saudi court, but I can't imagine that the Saudis are happy, like other Saudis are happy, because what's another thing that's important to understand is that they totally shifted the Saudi line of succession with him becoming king, with him becoming a new
He wasn't even supposed to. He doesn't even go here, like.
Well, it made sense because he's the son. I think he's the first son of King Solomon's third wife, or something like that. Mm-hmm. He's his favorite son, though. But I think Solomon had him when he was like 60, so he was his third wife, AKA. So he was an older father.
I think there was also like an age play there too, because the dude's like 34 years old right now, and like getting a young guy in power, in the crown means like a longer lasting dynasty for that family,
Well, every single other Saudi king is the father or is the son of Ibn Saud,
right?
Who is the founder of the third Saudi kingdom, mm-hmm. the original Saudi king, or not the original, but the founder of the modern Saudi state as we know it, Ibn Saud. He is the first crown prince who's not his son. He is the son of one of his sons. So the succession was going from it went from father to son to son to son to son to son, the brother, the brother, the brother, the brother, the brother, the brother, the brother. Mm-hmm. They thought that was going to continue because there was another crown prince who was very popular within Washington and Barack Obama, named Mohammed bin Nayef, mm-hmm. Who was very close with like the U.S. intelligence departments and Scotland Yard, and was very involved in the events that took place after 9/11 and fighting Al Qaeda in Saudi Arabia. He who was injured in a terrorist attack, actually.
I didn't know that.
Bin Nayef was very popular in Washington. However, he was ousted instead for Mohammed bin Salman.
For this dude.
for this guy. And there's like a 30-year age difference because bin Nayef was about 60 or so. Usually that's when they become crown prince. But I would be worried if I was MBS. MBS wouldn't be the first if something were to happen to MBS, it wouldn't be the first time something happened to a Saudi king. King Faisal was assassinated. I don't know what's going to happen to this guy, but it seems like he either is eventually going to be forced to resign, or...
I mean, postulating here, that might be the reason why he took such a firm stance and shook down all those folks, like to say, like, I'm, don't fuck with me, like I'm the man. But, like, inadvertently, I think he probably created more enemies than he did gained respect out of it.
Yeah. He's I don't think he's going to be around that much longer as the crown prince. We'll see, though. I kind of thought that a year ago, and he's still around. So
impeach MBS.
Impeach MBS. Apparently, doesn't work like that.
No, it doesn't.
It's the Grand Council has to make a decision. But yeah, it's weird. Jamal Khashoggi. So
yeah, let's talk about him for a minute.
Let's talk about Jamal Khashoggi. It's an interesting story because not that many people know that much about Jamal Khashoggi. I'm imagining most people didn't know who Jamal Khashoggi was until he was killed. Most Americans, I don't mean Arabs, obviously know who they are, but most Americans probably didn't know who Khashoggi was until he was assassinated. And he's an interesting guy because he is a Saudi insider. Mm-hmm. To say the least. Jamal Khashoggi was a Saudi Arabian journalist. He made his name in the late 80s, early 90s, covering radical groups in Afghanistan, specifically the radical groups that were fighting the Soviets, and that included Osama bin Laden.
Right.
He wrote for Al Hayat, which at the time was the biggest Arabic international newspaper in the world. He then went on to become the editor of the Arab News, which is the largest English daily in the Middle East. Mm-hmm. He also went on to become the political advisor of Prince Turki bin Faisal, who served as the director of Saudi intelligence, and who was also a diplomat to both the United States and the United Kingdoms. Mm-hmm. So he was a very, very big insider within the Saudi royal family. And he wasn't technically a prince, but he was certainly his patrons were certainly the royal family.
Right.
Like he was definitely he was definitely in it, if you know what I mean. So something that's also really interesting about Jamal Khashoggi is that if you notice, like, Khashoggi is not an Arabic name.
No.
It's not one at all. It's a Turkish name. His grandfather was from Turkey, but he was born in the Ottoman Empire. Mm-hmm. He had been living in, I believe his grandfather had been living in Mecca and was actually expelled during World War I. And he ended up in Damascus, and he went to Paris and eventually ended up in Riyadh as the personal physician for Ibn Saud, the first Saudi monarch, the first Saudi king of the Third Kingdom.
Quite the journey.
Quite the journey. And obviously, if you're the personal physician of the king, mm-hmm. Your kids are probably going to be taken care of, right?
Right. Well, I mean, that's the way that they do it in Saudi Arabia, right?
Well, he married an Arab woman, mm-hmm. and his grandfather ended up, one of his sons ended up being Adnan Khashoggi. That's Jamal mm-hmm. Khashoggi's uncle. Mm-hmm. And the only way to describe Adnan Khashoggi, and I don't know, have you heard of him before?
Only very recently.
Yeah. I'm going to play the clip, and let's just play the clip in the podcast, and mm-hmm. I think this will be do a better job at describing who he is than we can.
Okay.
So let's play it.
And Khashoggi, a lifestyle of heroic excess, is matched only by the zeal of the global press to explain this mysterious mogul whose name and face appear in headlines across the world. The multi-million-dollar deals, the $2.5 billion divorce case, seen with Farah, or Liza, or Frank Sinatra, and pictured in the tabloids with Jackie O and Joan Collins. America's richest man, Gordon Getty, has $4.1 billion compared to Khashoggi's estimated $10 billion. And though the cameras follow his every move, Khashoggi rarely talks to the press. Instead, they just speculate about him. But now the facts. He was born in Mecca in 1935 under the sign of Leo to a middle-class family. His Muslim religion and loyalty to the Saudi royal family are the pillars upon which his empire is built. Photographed with stars and celebrities, who he entertains lavishly in his 35 family homes, the real Khashoggi is a surprisingly private family.
He's a pretty interesting guy.
Yeah, to say the least.
Adnan Khashoggi, who is this mysterious man from the Middle East? With his riches, his riches are only matched by his women, who he likes young. Here's a picture with him and Sean Connery and Frank Sinatra.
And the Queen.
And the Queen. But he keeps his life private. So it's all messed out of the mystery. We don't even know how he made his money.
We're not even sure what he sounds like.
He's worth $10 billion, the richest man in the world. $10 billion, the richest man in the world. One can't even calculate this amount of wealth that's given into one person. But this Adnan Khashoggi represents everything that is mysterious about the lavish life of big cash, big guns, and sexy women. It's so funny because Adnan Khashoggi is that was the first time I saw that video a couple days ago. Mm-hmm. But I've always known of him as a guy who is very, very involved in smuggling arms and being a guy who basically made his weapon being kind of the middleman between the arms transactions. Mm-hmm. The guy was super rich, to say
crazy
the least.
Rich, especially for that time, dude.
For that. But there's a lot of like speculation of how much money he was actually worth. If he was worth $10 billion, if he was worth $4 billion, if he was worth like who fucking knows. But
so like Donald Trump today, right?
What's interesting is that what's interesting is that we'll get there. But his yacht was he had like a very notorious yacht that was purchased by Trump.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Well, he ended up owing, I think it was Oman. I forget exactly who he owed, but he lost it. He lost a yacht due to some type of a loan or something like that, and Trump ended up purchasing it. But it was one of those weird yachts, kind of like Jeffrey Epstein's Lolita Express or whatever he called it.
That's creepy.
He was kind of was shrouded in mystery, like a Jeffrey, like that's how I see him, like a Jeffrey Epstein type character.
Right, because he got around. I mean, like he was constantly like photographed with celebrities and like dignitaries and like all these VIP folks. And if you take a look at like the way that he was estimated to live his life, it's like what was The Economist in late 80s said it costs him $250K a day just to live his life. Like this man was hood rich, like so rich.
He was super, super rich, selling arms, being the middleman in shady transactions, and apparently these transactions all took place in a DC-8, in a blinged out DC-8. So,
yep.
Sky deals, get on my yacht, and make a deal with a Turk who's from Saudi. But he got in trouble. There's I don't know what there's a lot of allegations on him being involved in like human trafficking and stuff like that. I don't obviously know anything about that or have anything to speak of it. I just have the documents right here. I've just heard those allegations before that he was involved in like sex trafficking and things like that. I'd have no idea.
But more like arms trafficking,
possibly because he does sound a lot like the Epstein character
for sure.
But he did get. He was mentioned in Iran-Contra, and apparently he facilitated arms deals between Iran and the CIA when arming the Contras in Nicaragua.
Right.
And if you guys don't know what Iran-Contra is, it's basically when the U.S. tried to overthrow the Sandinista government
In Nicaragua.
and who overthrew the Somoza regime.
Also
And they
in
armed a group called the Contras, who were basically terrorists, and they did it secretly because the House, they passed an amendment that limited assistance to them because they were murdering journalists and stuff like that, and raping people and massacring villages. And the way that they funded the Contras was through secretly selling arms to Iran, who had hostages. Well, Hezbollah had hostages in Lebanon, so they were trying to like covertly fund this group to overthrow a government they didn't like.
That's never happened before, and
You know what it sounds a
since.
lot like? Iran-Contra is basically a prelude to the war in Syria.
Right.
It's like
Sounds a lot
exactly.
like it, yeah.
It's a complete prelude. Even the same characters were involved in it.
Yeah, right.
Like
It was the prequel.
it was the prequel. It was the forecoming of Syria. Because in Syria, like that's what they are. Actually, we have some good questions to kind of cover these topics. So maybe we should just go straight into the Q&A.
Yep, let's do it.
All right. So Q&A. That is the new theme song. Danny is working on a theme song, right?
Yep.
It's
coming
not
out
right,
soon.
Danny.
Them fire beats will be hitting
That
your
might be
ears.
out right now by the
Yeah.
time you finish it. I
Yeah,
don't know.
You never know. Maybe you already heard it, and you're
Maybe
like,
you already
wow.
heard it. All right, Q&A time. Bro in history. All right. First question. This segues directly into what we were talking about. What do people mean when they say that Obama supported Al-Qaeda? I find this very confusing. I'm not sure what they mean. Are they drawing ties with him being a Muslim, or are they saying that he actually supports Al-Qaeda?
I'll let you take this one.
So that's a good question, because that term is actually thrown out a lot.
Right.
So people will be like, "Oh, Obama supported Al-Qaeda," and when you say that to somebody, people are like, "What the fuck are you talking about? Al-Qaeda like Obama supported Al-Qaeda? Is this like birther type stuff?
Right.
Like, is this the
is
birther
pretty
movement type
crazy
stuff? Like he
sounding,
was a covert Al-Qaeda operative?
Right.
What people mean when someone says that Obama, like at least I can't speak for everyone, but if you listen to guys like Scott Horton, who says that a lot, or myself, who has probably said that before, or anyone who has been pretty critical of the Obama administration's policy during the Syrian war, they'll say that he funded Al-Qaeda or they funded ISIS. And there's varying degrees to this. So they either mean that, I guess, in the least egregious or the least serious accusation, they mean that they intentionally funded terrorists in Syria and Iraq during the Syrian war by giving arms to Syrian rebels who ended up just taking those arms and joining ISIS or Al-Qaeda or whatever group. Because it is kind of a talking point when you say Obama supported Al-Qaeda, and it's like a talking point that you need to explain with a little bit of context.
Right.
So if you're going to say Obama, it's like, oh, it's interesting. Like Obama had all these non-lethal aid packages and gave all these Syrian rebels or these FSA guys arms, and they went ahead and they ended up just joining the crazy militants. So it's kind of like Obama supported Al-Qaeda. Like that would be a lot better to say, I feel.
Right.
Because when you think about it, Al-Qaeda is these groups. Al-Qaeda is kind of a blanket term for basically all of these Islamist groups in Syria or in other places as well. When people are saying that he supported Al-Qaeda, it can mean like there's so many different groups that are constantly fighting each other,
changing their names,
and they will show patronage to one. Like these guys, they follow a strongman warlord type who kind of runs it, and they play patronage to another person. They're just kind of a better way to think of them is not as malicious, but as like criminal groups.
Right.
Like they're just like a bunch of different rival criminal groups that happen to align with the same interests sometimes and work together, and then happen to fight over rival turf. In their case, they fight over who wants to extort the population with tax money and stuff like that, and oil revenues. So I think that's what people mean when they say Obama supported Al-Qaeda. Another way that you could look at it, if you want to be more severe with your accusation, which I think is very fair, and you can look into this, is that you can relate that back to Iran-Contra, where people intentionally supported Al-Qaeda, where the CIA, if you want to go really, really hard into it, if you really want to make a strong accusation of it, you could say that the CIA intentionally funds those groups with the mission of overthrowing Assad, which there have been people within the Obama office who have said things like that. So that's fair enough accusation, but either or, if you use the talking points, Obama supported Al-Qaeda, just be prepared to talk a little bit more about it rather than just saying
context,
like, Obama supported Al-Qaeda. You got to be like, Obama's foreign policy to fund Salafist extremists was supporting Al-Qaeda. Just
right.
That's just my take on it, because too many people talking points. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Like
sound bites and shit.
Even sound bites, and I know it's an effective way to get your messaging across in a very short period of time. However, when you say that,
it just confuses people, and it makes you sound stupid sometimes. Like in this case, Obama supports Al-Qaeda. It's like, yeah, not entirely, but like I see where you're going there. You need to be able to like spit real facts, and sometimes it's just not enough time to do that, and that's where shit like this comes into play.
Well, the thing with Obama supported Al-Qaeda is that you can get confused with the birther stuff. It has nothing to do with the birther stuff when people say that.
Different talking point.
They're not saying he's Muslim. They're saying that he covertly armed them to overthrow Arab governments. All right, let's go on to the next question.
Cool.
This question is pretty gay. Sorry. I'm sorry. I'm going to read it. So, I know you guys are Star Wars fans. I remember the episode where you rant for like 20 minutes about the hole in the Death Star. Nerds. In parentheses. Wanted to know what your take is on Mark Hamill throwing shade on Ivanka's family picture on Twitter.
I actually did see this too.
What is he talking about?
So like, if you Google, I don't know what you could Google to get this, but like, just look for Mark Hamill's like statuses on Twitter, and Ivanka put up this picture of like her family on Twitter, and like one of her kids, I don't know which one, I don't know their names, is dressed up like a stormtrooper, and Ivanka goes, "The Force is strong with my family." And I mean, I love Mark Hamill. I do love Star Wars. I think this one bit maybe went a little too far, but he says, it was actually pretty funny.
He's like, "Cunt."
No. He's got more tact than that. He says, "You misspelled fraud. Go force yourself."
No, he said that.
Yeah, he did hashtag go force yourself. I don't know. I thought it was funny. I thought it was funny from like from a comedian's perspective. I mean, I don't like the Trumps. I don't like Ivanka Trump. I don't like anything about what they do and what they represent. But like, she's just being a person and putting a picture of her like kid dressed up in a stormtrooper costume. I don't know what the context is behind that. Maybe it's his like Halloween costume or some shit like that, and that's fine. But you know, like leave her alone for this one. Like, especially for leave the kid alone. Like, you know, it's just like taking a picture and shit. Like, I don't know. I thought that was a bridge too far. You know, we can definitely make, you know, talk all day about shit that the Trump family does that's worth, you know, throwing shade on. I just thought that was a little silly. But some funny responses to that that other Twitter followers were saying was like, one of them pointed out how ironic it was that that basically she, you know, the excuse me, the stormtroopers are the bad guys, you know, which is interesting, you know. What were some of the other ones here, Henry? I think
I'm looking at the article he sent me that's on here.
Can you unclick, because I can't see the link? I want to read through them again. Cool. Neat. Yeah, so that was one of them. Another one, good quote was like, "I've got a bad feeling about this," which is just perfect, you know, in terms of a response. If you're a Star Wars nerd, you'll get it.
So, all right. I'm sorry that I'm making fun of you, but I'm just not a fan of like the, oh, I got shade on the Trump family. Psh, boom. Eat that, Trump. Fuck you, Trump. Russiagate. Robert Mueller. I hate that so much. So I was listening to, I think it's very fair to give real criticism on Trump, and I think that stuff shades him from real criticism.
Yeah, I agree.
I think that's an important thing. Now, the other day I saw the roast of Alec Baldwin. Mm-hmm. It was funny. Mm-hmm. All the Comedy Central roasts are really funny.
Right, hilarious.
There isn't. There's not one that I've seen that I didn't like. Mm-hmm. Robert De Niro gets up, and he is talking about, just like every single set. He has a segment at the end. He's like, "Oh, you're gonna get you like Robert Mueller, who's gonna beat up Trump. That fucking criminal Trump. Robert Mueller's gonna fuck him." And I'm like, what the hell is the matter with Robert De Niro? Like, is he's either lost his mind, or just so ideologically possessed with his hate his hate for Donald Trump, or he's just so completely unaware of how he sounds. He sounded like a complete moron. And he was on Fox News the other day, Robert De Niro, mm-hmm. and he was talking about, fuck you, Fox News. You support Donald Trump. Donald Trump in Russia. Like, dude, Robert De Niro, what happened to you? You are in my favorite movies. And I can't hate you because I love Casino so much. And I love Goodfellas. And I can't ever hate you. But just, you're really old now. And you're not in good movies anymore. So I guess I understand that. I guess you get stuck in this weird Hollywood trap of that, like, really corporate liberal, neoliberal identity. I hate Trump mix, but I just can't. I'm not a fan of it. I like it when people like they like, I thought it was super cool. I think it's super cool when Tulsi Gabbard shits on Trump, and she says stuff like, "You're Saudi Arabia's bitch." Yeah, because it's true.
Yeah,
and I'm like, yeah, that's some real criticism. I'll get behind that. Or if you say some stuff about, like, if you're going to go into his like economic policies and say and argue tariffs and things like that, I'm fine. I like that type of stuff. Or if you're going to talk about like employment numbers and how they're not realistic, or how he's kind of playing, he's taking too much credit for the economy. If you're giving real criticism to Trump, like, I think that's great and you need to do it.
But that doesn't give you points on the internet. And that's where I think I was like, all right.
I know, Mark, you're not going to be Mark, like, you know, well, protectionist foreign policy.
It's like retweeted 3 million times.
Retweeted,
you know, like,
3 million.
Hashtag foreign policy, you know, like, that's never going to
This tweet about tariffs has gone viral.
You know? I mean, like, I get it. People are frustrated with, you know, Donald Trump, or with the Trump family.
Lindsay Lohan's tweet about tariffs shows us an important message about protectionist economic policy.
Yeah, I mean, I get it. I mean, people express their grief in different ways. In this one in particular, like, again, I love Mark Hamill, and I actually thought it was funny, like, out of context, but, like, leave her alone. Like, she's just posting a picture of her family. Like, nobody would like having, you know, putting up a picture of their family on the internet, and then suddenly, like, everyone's throwing shade on you just because you're a terrible person in business and in and in other things. I don't know. I go back and forth on it, but
it's like, I think it's fun to make fun of Trump for like the sleaziness factor. I think those are really fair. If you're going to take shots at him, I like to go at the sleaziness factor of like his weird kind of deals in the 80s and stuff like that. That's where I like to take shots.
That's why this comment is pretty funny in my opinion, because she says the force is strong with my family, and Mark Hamill, he replaces it with the fraud is strong with his family. It's really true. It's super poignant, So I don't know, that's kind of sleazy, the sleazy deals that they do. But I guess the point that I'm getting at is like, it was a picture of a kid in like a Star Wars costume. Like, if she had said that because she was in a Star Wars costume or because Jared was in a Star Wars costume, then like that's fair game, but like leave the kid out of it,
Jared probably dresses up as a stormtrooper with Benjamin Netanyahu when they're playing Hot Wheels in his room when Benjamin Netanyahu has sleepovers at the Kushner
Jared
house.
Definitely dresses. If Jared dresses up as anything in Star Wars, he dresses up either as Princess Leia in that, like,
Jared,
slave thing.
the Death Star is 6 months away from blowing up Alderaan. Jared, the Death Star is 6 months away. All right.
Let's move on.
All right, fucking... All right, we got 2 more questions. Let's go into this next question because it segues into this. What's going on with this Ukraine scandal and President Trump? Sorry, I can't read. What was the U.S. aid package to Ukraine that Trump allegedly used as a bargaining chip to get dirt on Biden's son? Do other countries get this aid too, or is it just Ukraine? Do you think this is impeachable offense? Bonus. Trump quoted some guy on Fox News saying if Congress impeaches him, there will be a civil war. All right. Impeaches him. Trump quotes some guy on Fox saying if Congress impeaches him, there will be a civil war.
I did actually see that.
Impeaches him.
Impeachment inquiry.
Will there be? I don't know. I don't know. Listen, I'll be honest. I'm not following the story that much. My immediate reaction to this is like, this is just another way. This is just kind of like a repeat or a way to put the defibrillator on Russiagate. So I'm just like, all right. I've been listening to like just podcasts I listen to, like Jimmy Dore and stuff like that, their takes on it. And I was listening to Aaron Matei or Mate, I think it's Aaron Matei, talking about it. And there's like all these, who's a leftist, so it's not like I'm listening to like right wingers say this. Usually that guy, Glenn Greenwald and Aaron Matei and Michael Tracy are all liberals who have been covering this, and they've been kind of tearing these narratives apart. And I just don't. I don't have enough bandwidth to cover these scandals. I'll just be completely honest. So when they come up, I'm just not. I'm just like I'm already assuming that they're bullshit.
Well, that's what I'm here for.
I'm already assuming that they're bullshit, and I kind of discredit them immediately. So that's probably not the best mindset to have.
Yeah,
However, there's only so many things that I can consume.
That's true, and that's what I'm here for, right?
So that's why you have two perspectives. That's why you got two perspectives on here.
It's basically The View with fewer people.
It's basically
with fewer
The Views.
Whoopi Goldbergs.
There's basically the View, but with, I guess, 3 less penises, right?
Oh, dude. No. All right, let's move on. Let me answer the question. Okay, so so the actual question is, what's going on with the Ukraine scandal and President Trump? TLDR, Trump had a conversation with the president of Ukraine. His name is like Volodymyr Zelensky or whatever. Fun fact about this guy: he used to be a comedian. and he played a like the president of Ukraine in like a sitcom or whatever. And there's also this one clip that I saw on one of the late night talk shows of him like playing piano with his dick, or at least that was the bit, which is pretty funny. And now he's like the leader of Ukraine. Anyway, that's a side note. So he had a call with the president of Ukraine, and allegedly, a few weeks beforehand, actually not allegedly, legitimately, a few weeks beforehand, Trump put a stop to an aid package that was pretty much billed to go over to the Ukraine. The aid package totaled $391 million in military aid. And it was for things related to the military. So one thing that Zelensky had asked about was, buying some Javelin anti-tank weapons. And, so $250 million or so of that money was supposed to go to the Ukraine, to the Security Cooperation Fund, it's called. And that's for like additional training, some equipment, and like, some consulting, things like that to help boost Ukraine's armed forces. And then the State Department actually put an additional $141 million on top of that. But that was like a separate thing from the Pentagon's plans. And basically what this is for, and why this is specific to Ukraine, although many other countries do receive, aid from the United States. This particular package was just for the Ukraine. And a lot of it is, because they need to, bring up their armed forces, to combat Russia, which is like our mortal enemy. But legitimately, though, Ukraine did lose 13,000 people, of its people, and not because they died, but because they are now Russians when they lost the Crimea area. So basically,
didn't they vote to get right back in Russia though?
That's right, but they also lost a lot of assets. Well, it's still in question whether or not that was a legitimate election, but that's a different conversation.
But people say it like the Russians annexed Crimea, like they voted.
Well,
it was a Russian-speaking area of the Ukraine.
Yeah, but it depends, because if they completely botched an election, like if it was a bullshit election, and then that would be an annexation, just an annexation hidden in a bullshit election. But that's a
Vladimir Putin is so savvy.
That's a completely different conversation, and we'll
annex America next through our election process. You vote for Russia for our next president. Oh, we annex you.
So here's why I think you should pay attention, and why I don't think this is bullshit. So the reason why this of all the like 1,000 things that Trump has done that maybe could have been impeachable offenses, the reason why this is gaining so much steam and moving so quickly is because it's simple to understand, and we have the evidence immediately for it, right?
What's the evidence?
He released the damn transcript and like fucking Rudy Giuliani's on TV every day confirming the fact that, yeah, in fact, he did ask President Zelensky to look into, President Biden's son, because there was evidently some shit that went down that maybe he should have went to jail for or something like that. I don't remember the exact situation there, but in general, there was a trial and he was acquitted of any wrongdoing, Biden's son. But this is obviously politically motivated. Why is that a priority for us to find out right now? Clearly it's because Biden's the front runner right now, and he wants to learn some shit so that he can attack Joe Biden on. But additionally, in that same conversation, he did talk about like getting to the bottom of like Russia, the Russiagate thing, and like why whether they wanted, Trump said he wanted their servers so that they can inspect them to find out like why the DNC tried to manufacture this bullshit. It's like, dude, none of this has anything to do with like actual foreign policy, and the fact that he withheld this valuable, asset on purpose. Let's be real. Like this is all in, his leverage points in the art of the deal. Like he wanted to get a leverage point above them, hold it over their head. He's like, hey, you want that money? How about you tell me what I want to hear? It's like, so the point is, unlike the Russia scandal, we immediately got the evidence for it. He admitted to it. And it's simple. It's simple to understand. right? It's not like multifaceted with a bunch of different countries involved with all this, like, you know, Paul Manafort's and your, you know, and your Cohens and all this other shit. No, it's just like real simple to understand.
Let's raid Roger Stone.
Exactly.
Let's raid the 75-year-old man, or however old he was.
Yeah, well, he's a piece of shit, but that's a different story. Anyway, that's why this is important, and that's why this has actually some legs, because literally you can go and read right now the transcript. You know, it's like obviously clear. Like the dude is doing mafia talk, right? It's like, hey, nice country you got here. Be a shame if you didn't get that aid package. You know, like doesn't actually talk about it, but. And then Mike Pompeo, fat boy, he was on the call too, and he knew about it the whole time, and he was like trying to deny it. And then they try to rope. Basically, President Trump said he wanted to. You should work with my personal lawyer Rudy Giuliani and William Barr. And it's like, all right, this dude is bringing in his Secretary of State, his personal lawyer Rudy Giuliani, and the Secretary General of the United States into what appears to be, using the abusing the office of abusing his office to get information about, like, politically motivated information for the next election. There was no like impending disaster that we need to know this information about right now, you know. And it certainly isn't a coincidence that he withheld the money, and they admit to all of this. That's the point. And if you hear the way he reacts to it, like he's literally saying, you know, he was saying like, oh, everybody's a treasonous person. Like the whistleblower that brought this up is like fucking, I don't know. He's a treasonous traitor that should go to jail or worse, you know. And the type of rhetoric that's coming out of his mouth is just makes it absolutely clear. It's like, yeah, dude, you did something wrong. You got caught. And now you're trying to, you know, do this. And on that last point, that bonus, Trump quoting this guy on Fox News. So that guy was a pastor, one of those crazy, like, evangelical types, notable for, saying a lot of crazy shit. But he actually said he's afraid that there would be a civil war if we impeach Trump. And Trump quoted him without doing the afraid part. And I think it's disgusting. Like, why are you talking about that? Like, you're the president of the United States. You're supposed to be the unifying force in the, in our country. And, like, you might have got caught doing something wrong, but, like, even Nixon didn't do that shit. Like, even Bill Clinton didn't try and divide the country in that kind of way using that rhetoric. It's just disgusting. Will there be a civil war? No. No, there won't. I think he's trying to drum up some support for himself, but that's a dangerous way to drum up support for your case.
No, I don't think there'll be a civil war if Donald Trump is impeached. I think people are overplaying that new age civil war thing.
Yeah. Totally.
A lot of it is just like sensationalized from like other alternative media figures who have jumped on the culture war is getting out of control. Oh, the leftist Antifa, the patriots fighting. Ah.
I mean, Trump did tweet this, though. Let's be clear. Like, he's the one that's saying it right now.
He's Donald.
he's the one that's doing it.
He's Donald. He's Donald Trump. It's what we expect at this point. I need to look into this story more because I'm not caught up on it at all. So you have the advantage of this debate, Danny. So I won't let you have the upper hand on me, but I'm so exhausted from the Russiagate scandal. It's hard for me to look at it seriously. However, I will get up to date with this, and I will tell you if I disagree or not.
Awesome.
All right, I may disagree with you, but I'll fight to the death for your right to say it. I'm paraphrasing that. Is that Voltaire?
Yeah, I think so, yeah.
It's Voltaire? Okay. There's one last question. Let's wrap this up. Did you hear about Trump tossing out Bilal Abdul Karim? I'm like dyslexic, by the way. Did you hear about Trump tossing out Bilal Abdul Karim's case? Saying, did you hear about Trump tossing out Bilal Abdul's case of being taken off the kill list? What are your thoughts? I remember you doing an episode on him a while back. Yeah, so Bilal Abdul Karim is a guy who covers the Salafist militias in the northern part of Syria, in Idlib, and he's very sympathetic to him, and he kind of portrays them in a positive light. So if you watch his he has a YouTube channel. It's called OBGN or something, OGN. Just type in Bilal Abdul Karim and you'll bring up his YouTube channel. And he's interviewing these guys on the ground in Idlib in Syria. And I actually appreciate that he puts this stuff out, because you can just tell how insane the people that these people are. Like, it's sunshine to me.
Right.
So he'll interview like guys in different just different Al-Qaeda affiliates, or ones that are leaving, or ones that are fighting with each other. And it's kind of like sometimes they'll cover the girl drama within like these different rebel groups or terrorist groups in northern Syria. And he's on the ground and he covers them. So apparently he says he's on a kill list. So I think it's been in like 4 or 5 times he claimed that there was drone strikes on his life. And I definitely don't agree that he should be put on a kill list. So despite what he's doing, if you want to say that he's a terrorist sympathizer, maybe. If you want to say that he's being misrepresented for covering jihadists, he certainly has a good narrative on them. Yeah. Do you want to say, does he deserve to be put on a kill list? No, I don't think any American deserves to be put on a kill list. He's an American citizen. You can't just murder somebody without due process. The guy needs to have a trial. So I don't think that's right. And unfortunately, Barack Obama made a status quo that probably will never go away, where a president can kill whoever they want at the flick of a drone. Right. So I don't think that I don't like Bilal Abdul Karim, but I certainly don't think that an American citizen should be murdered on the other side of the world. So
I agree.
I don't like it, and it sucks, and I honestly appreciate him doing the work he does, because I think it's sunshine into that area that's needed. If you want to closely follow the Syrian war, it's good to get the perspective of the crazies up there, just so you know how weird it is. Like, he covers HTS and he interviews them, and like all they talk about is Allah is great. We come and we sack the city, and Allah is great. And the other group, they dishonored us, and they are not friends with Allah. Like, they're what you would expect people who want to build a caliphate to say. So it's I think the sunshine's actually I think what he does is actually valuable to people who want to follow get Technicolor in that conflict.
Right. Well, I mean, love him or hate him, he's presenting a side that you probably won't be seeing very frequently, and it's
the thing is, though, is that I think a lot of the problems is that he will work with like CNN sometimes, or he was on what network was he on a while back? Was it Channel 4? Sky News. He was on Sky News.
Yeah.
And they did a Sky News journalists were down him. They were with him in Idlib, and they were covering a story, and he was part of the production, or he was part of the crew. So do they work with him because they can get access to those those conflict zones? Yeah. I mean, do they work with them because they want to portray those rebels as rebels or moderate? Maybe. It's all possible, but at the end of the day, I don't think that they should be trying to murder him.
Right.
That's my take.
My take. No murdering people who cover the news.
no murdering journalists. Let's just set that standard.
Yeah.
Like, and don't murdering American citizens without
due
process, because that's
I'd extend that. No murdering any citizens without due process. How about that?
Yeah, that's a better standard to go with. Yeah. But if we can't even do American citizens right, then how the fuck are we supposed to value other people's lives?
That's true.
If we can't keep up with that bar of like not killing your citizens not executing your citizens without a proper trial, then there's no bar. But I don't even know if he's on a kill list, to be completely honest. It's not a fact. It's what he says. He's saying he is on a kill list, and I think the government is revealing to say they're refusing to let him know if he's on it or not.
Yeah, but that's not a standard for the government to say, like, oh yeah, you're on a kill list.
Exactly.
Like, don't tell people that, like, they're on a kill list. That shit is covert, top secret, eyes only shit.
I know. You're not like, here's who's on it. That would be some real Mad Max type shit.
I feel like the only
here's
time
everyone on the kill list today. Everyone gets $10,000.
The last time you saw like a public and open and available kill list was like right after 9/11, when they made those like playing cards of all the terrorists that they wanted to get.
And those guys weren't American citizens.
Right, exactly. I mean, not that it makes a difference, but the point though is I think that was like the only time. And like if you're on a kill list, especially if you're an American citizen on a kill list, you're not gonna know. No one's gonna know.
Yeah, you're not. They don't give you a letter. It's not like jury duty.
Yeah.
You've been summoned on a kill list. Step outside so a drone can kill you. Gotcha. That's drone tech. That's the U.S. drone technology. $250 million a unit at work.
Jesus.
Just takes a letter to get you out.
$150,000 a rocket. Like
one kill list letter. Say you are being served on a kill list. You will come in. You will come in on this date to be drone striked by a $250 million drone.
With a $150,000 rocket.
With a $150,000 rocket.
Yeah.
It will be a very, very quick and swift and expensive execution. And we'll have to use a couple more rockets because we'll probably miss the first couple times. We'll hit a hospital by accident. Oops. All right. Oh, is there anything else? Do we have any more questions?
I don't think so.
Scroll in the email. No, we don't have any more. All right.
Send us your questions.
Send us your questions at info@brohistory.com. It's a special email we set up for questions.
That's correct.
That's correct. Special email we set up for the Q&A section. So email your questions at info@brohistory.com. We enjoy them. This is a really fun part we like doing on the show. So send them over. Another thing, rate and review the podcast. We are at we're close. We're getting close to 200 ratings on Apple, which is a good sign. So help us get to 200. It'd be huge for us. Let's just put it that way.
Huge.
All right, Siren's coming. I think we should wrap it up.
Yep. All right. See y'all.
All right. Peace, guys.